What's going on, guys? We are live. Little interview series we're doing here.
I hope you guys are enjoying this. And again, varies, right? Time wise. So yesterday was one, today's two. But if you join us, you have questions, you can DM us. We'll let you know who we're having. Today's an exciting one.
Yes, it is. He was on our podcast, Keto for Normies, episode 35.
So a while ago.
Since then, he's had a meteoric rise. I would say almost 100% due to his appearance on our podcast. What would you say?
Yeah. Oh, we've given him all of his clout. And then he also has a beautiful baby.
Yep.
Beckett. Oh my God, I can't wait to chat about him.
You guys know him based on the comments. It's always like, Dr. Barry disagrees with what you guys just said. But here he is. How's it going, Dr. Barry?
Hey, it's going great, guys. It's a pleasure to talk with you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Do you agree with our assessment? Was the meteoric rise due in part to us having you on?
Like all I had on YouTube was crickets chirping until I did that interview with you guys, and then it just blew up.
Yeah. So just past 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah. I can't
Congrats.
believe that. It's a bit unbelievable, but yeah, it's there.
So you're gonna get the gold play button in the mail anytime now, right?
Already got it on the wall, baby.
Oh, that's sweet. So yeah, I'm thinking, is it harder to get a gold play button than it is to get one of those diplomas you got back there?
No.
No? Okay.
Maybe for some people, but not for others. But yeah, for me, the diplomas were way harder.
Yeah, okay. So the first question I wanted to get out just right away is what's going on with the thumbnails on your videos? They're all the same picture.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that I've been doing that for so long, people wouldn't know it was me if I didn't have that thumbnail.
Okay, I thought for like 1 million you'd have like some graphic designer do something crazy or something.
Yeah, no, it's literally still just me and an Amazon tripod and my iPhone. That's how I do all my videos.
Low overhead.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think last time we talked to you, so it was over 2 years ago, you were mostly doing a keto diet. Carnivore diet wasn't really as big of a thing yet. Right. And I haven't been keeping too close of tabs on you, but have you switched to doing more of a carnivore diet now, or what's changed with your diet?
Yeah, for the last almost 15 months now, I've been 99% carnivore. And I started it as just a 1 month challenge on my Facebook page with my Facebook peeps. I just said, hey, this crazy Sean Baker guy, let's just try this and we'll just see what's up, right? And so I had multiple medical problems before I started keto, which we could talk about if you'd like. But I had a few that were, everything was much, much better with the keto diet, 80% better, if not 100% better. But I still had a few lingering things that were not 100% yet. And after 1 month of eating nothing but basically beef, bacon, butter, and eggs, even those things were 100% gone. And it was, and so at the end of that month challenge for carnivore, I thought, I feel really great, and I've lost another 6 or 7 pounds, and the rest of my little medical health problems are gone. I think I'm going to do this for another month, and at the end of each month, I just keep extending it another month. And if I start to feel bad or start to have some problem, if I develop scurvy or something like that, then I'll go back to eating keto. But none of that stuff is yet to happen.
Yeah. So because I know there's a lot of different ways people do this, of course. You got Sean Baker's one version, which is ribeyes. That's like, the more I learn about things, that scares me a little. I don't think you're always talking about the proper human diet. I don't think that's it. I don't think we've ever really eaten that. But then you have other people doing more of like nose to tail approach. That makes a little bit of sense to me. Yeah. I always have the question though, like, is that the proper human diet, or is like some mixture of like a little bit of plants in there better?
Like eating seasonally.
Yeah, maybe like some seasonal plants.
And let's get back to talking about the seasonal thing later, because there's an important point that people need to understand about that. But that's a very valid question. So I don't agree with my good friend, Dr. Sean Baker, about just eating ribeye. And obviously it's working very well for him, and it's working very well for thousands of other carnivores, some of which have been doing it for 5 or 10 or 15 years, eating nothing but muscle meat and some fat and salt and water. That's literally the entirety of their diet for over a decade. And all of them look 10 years younger than their age. They're all muscly. They all have great skin and seem to be fairly mentally alert. So I do think that is a viable option, but I in this respect, I agree more with my good friend, Dr. Paul Saladino, that I think there's no anthropological debate that our ancestors ate organ meats and ate them not out of necessity, but out of on purpose. Yeah. And so I try to get plenty of liver. I try to get plenty of heart. If I can get Nisha's dad, Pedro, to shoot a deer or a turkey, we always harvest the liver and the heart of those animals. I eat fish roe. I eat a lot of seafood in my carnivore diet, which a lot of people don't do. And they think that carnivore means just red meat. And I don't think that. I don't think our ancestors ever limited themselves. I think if they found some tasty seafood, they ate that too.
Yeah. So it seems like a really hard thing to get right. And I think the more you reduce carbs, the more you reduce plants, it seems to be magnified, is electrolytes. So I'm curious, are you actively supplementing electrolytes? To what degree? And because I've looked back and it seems like historically, ancestrally, we got a lot of potassium, like tons of potassium relative to what we get now. Yep. And we also probably got more sodium. Yep. And I know the guidelines now are like lower sodium, but that seems to be probably due to our absence of potassium in our diet. So what do you make of all that? And then magnesium is another one we're not getting as much of. Do you have any protocols for electrolytes?
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do is mimic how I think and how the paleoanthropological evidence shows that our ancestors ate 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 years ago. And back in those days, they did not have blocks and tackle. Like if they killed an 800-pound megafauna, they didn't have the ability to hold it up and drain the blood. So they ate the blood as well. The meat that they ate had the blood in it. And if you've ever pricked your finger and tasted the blood, it's very salty. There's tons of sodium and potassium and chloride and magnesium, and also all the other minerals that the human body needs in that blood. And also, when our ancestors were thirsty, they did not drink city water, nor well water, nor distilled water, nor reverse osmosis water. They drank water out of a river or a stream or a mud puddle. And all of those sources are also rich in all of the electrolytes and minerals that we need, and also rich in Giardia lambda as well, which will kill you. So I don't recommend anybody do that. Even the hardest core carnivores need to drink safe water. But that's how our ancestors got all this extra salt and sodium. And then also, I think, just like other mammals that we have evidence of, they were fully aware of which rocks had the high sodium content and which muds had the high salt content. I think they utilized that in their diet, because there's no doubt that all mammals, including humans, are salty. We love salt and we crave salt because we need salt. And so in that respect, even when I was keto, I was always supplementing. And my preference is the Keto Chow electrolyte drops or fasting drops, but I know there are other good electrolyte supplements on the market. But I think then there's two other problems. So first of all, we're not getting the blood, we're not drinking the stream water. And so also there is a concept called dilution, which both in agriculture, animal and plant, we've been breeding and crossbreeding so that we get bigger fruits that are sweeter. And so we've been breeding for size and taste, and we haven't really been breeding for nutrition. And so the broccoli that you buy in the store today may be 30 to 50% more deficient in potassium or magnesium than broccoli even from 30 or 50 years ago. And there's actually research to back that up. And in the same respect, I think that animal-based foods are also depleted because we've been breeding for size and we've been breeding for taste. We haven't been breeding so that the ribeye would have more magnesium and potassium in it, and therefore it's less. And then the third thing would be soil depletion. When you're monocropping hundreds of thousands of acres with rice, oats, corn, and millet, amaranth, quinoa, all this stuff, you're depleting the soil. And most of the farmers will put back 3 or 4 of the elements, but they don't put back all the elements. And that's why I think a great many of us are depleted in both electrolytes and in all the other essential minerals that all of us, none of us talk enough about minerals, but I think we should talk about them more.
Do you have any guidelines like milligram quantities? What's a good starting point for a
You
carnivore
know,
diet?
I used to talk about that sort of thing, but now every cup of coffee that I have, I put a cap full of electrolyte drops in, and I'm actually working on a mineral drop. I'm trying to get a formulation down so that you can get all your electrolytes and all of the essential minerals kind of in one daily drop that would just globally have all of the electrolytes and minerals in them all at the same time. So I'm working on that, but ideally that'd be the best way to do this, is just to every time you drink some liquids, just have a few drops of electrolyte and mineral replacement in there. And then you're actually mimicking what we did 100,000 years ago when we drank the river water or the stream water or the mud puddle water. You're getting all of your minerals all from that same source.
So the fact that it's in liquid form, is that more available to the body?
That's what I was gonna say. Will it be absorbed if like it's a bolus like that?
If it's manufactured properly, and that's a big deal, it has to be in a certain molecular form. It can't be just big chunks of magnesium and potassium in there, and iodine and molybdenum and boron. It has to be of the a small enough size that your body can actually make use of it. And that's a very, very important point, because some mineral supplements you maybe absorb 5 or 10% because the bulk of it is either inorganically produced or the molecular structure is just too big to be utilized by the body. But that's absolutely a very important question to ask.
And then I'm curious about sensitivity. So I know a lot of people do the carnivore diet as an elimination diet, like, if they have conditions, autoimmune issues. But if you want to introduce something back into your diet and you have a reaction to it, even if it's like squash or broccoli or something, does that mean you have a sensitivity, or is it just because you've kept it out for so long, you're going to have a natural reaction when your body takes it in?
Well, I think that if it's part of the proper human diet, if it's truly a nutritious, positive human food, then I don't think you should have a reaction to that. I mean, it just that doesn't make any physiological or evolutionary sense that if you react to something, because in the wild, if we reacted to something, we'd never touch it again. Just like I'm sure we all of us have had that experience where you got sick for whatever reason right after you ate or drank a certain thing. For Nisha, it's tequila. For me, it's some food that I ate as a kid, and then you throw up and you're like, nope, I'm never touching that again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hardwired evolutionary reaction to that sort of thing. So I think that if it is a proper food for you personally, I don't think you're going to have a reaction to it.
That's interesting.
A lot of people use carnivore as an elimination diet. I think that's entirely appropriate. Some people like me need to just eat as few carbohydrates as they possibly can. When my carbohydrate intake is 5 total grams a day or less, that's where I do my best physically and mentally. And so that's why I in particular do a carnivore or a very, very carnivore-ish diet. Other people, like I'm sure you've heard Michaela Peterson's story, she literally has reactions in her joints minutes or hours after she eats particular plant foods, and therefore she knows immediately I shouldn't be eating that.
Yeah, I agree with your theory about the proper human foods. Obviously, you won't have reactions to. But there seems to be something at play where it's like, I used to eat a standard American diet, like even worse, like the picture of the standard American diet. And like, if I would have any of that food now, I would feel significantly worse and more like something was totally wrong than when I was just eating it every day.
Yep.
So, and I think like it seems to be a lot of people experience when you do a really restrictive elimination diet, even when you add back in some things that maybe you can tolerate, there seems to be like some sort of a negative effect to them. Maybe it's like for me, like broccoli. Like if I'm having 0 carbs for a month and then I have 100 grams of broccoli, it'll be like not that comfortable. But if I'm having 50 net carbs for a month and then I have the broccoli, I'll handle that pretty well. That's my experience.
So is that saying like broccoli isn't a part of the proper human diet, or it's not proper for Matthew? Because everyone talks about how individual we are, right? But are we that individualized where we shouldn't all be eating a set of foods?
I think to some degree we are all individuals, but also we are the same species. And so just as there is a cat appropriate diet, which should be all meat, I think there is a spectrum. And that's how I like to talk about it, because I agree. I don't think there's one specific diet that's right for every human, but I do think there's a spectrum of a proper human diet that all humans should eat. But back to your broccoli question, I think there are a set of foods that are absolutely proper and help a human being optimize their health. I think there's kind of a secondary tier of foods which we can eat just fine, and they're going to keep us alive and relatively healthy and no problem. And I think there's a tertiary set of foods that are excellent for you if you're starving to death. So in other words, eating a jelly donut or eating whole wheat bread, I think is much preferable to starving to death and dying. Does that make sense? But I don't in any way think that kind of food lends itself to an optimal human health, whether physical health or mental health. I think that that's not where being optimal lies. Now back to your broccoli. I love to use this analogy because I think many of the foods that we used to eat and that some of us still eat are actually slow poisons for the human system. And so if I went out on Broadway in downtown Nashville and I found an alcoholic laying there, and he drinks 3 bottles of cheap vodka a day, and I said, here, I want you to drink this 2-ounce shot of beer, and then I want you to tell me how you feel. He would say, thanks for the beer. He would drink it, and then I would say, do you feel any different? He would say, no, right? Because his system's already poisoned. But now, if you'd asked that alcoholic an hour before that, how do you feel today? Do you feel pretty normal? He'd say, yeah, it's a pretty normal day. I feel normal. But my opinion is that alcoholic has no idea what the word normal means as far as physical and mental function when it comes to a human being, because his or her system is so poisoned by the slow poison of the vodka every single day that first of all, he thinks that's normal for a human being, even though it's far from normal, far from optimal. But also when he does my beer experiment and drinks 2 ounces of beer, he doesn't feel any worse at all. And so he's like, no, beer's not bad. Beer's good for you because I feel great after I drank 2 ounces of beer. Mm-hmm. And so I think most people, when you start to think of foods that way, that processed crap we used to eat is a slow poison. Our body was so sick and so sluggish and so inflamed back then that if you said, hey, I'm going to eat a handful of blueberries, do I feel any better? No, I feel the same. And in reality, you felt like crap. But if I had asked you back then, you'd say, no, I feel pretty good today. But you had no idea what feeling good even meant back when you were eating the slow poison foods, just as the alcoholic doesn't even know what normal feels like when he's drinking 4/5 of vodka a day. Does that analogy make sense?
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. How do you like Nashville?
Oh, I love Nashville, man. It used to be the city we would drive to, for concerts and events, and we moved and we live in the city limits, but we got a 3-acre plot, and it really feels like we're still in the country, even though we can Uber to an international airport. So that's very nice.
Are you a country music guy?
No.
Okay. See, we went to Nashville.
You with like boots, though, right? You have like. Boots.
No, there's a huge music scene in Nashville here that's not just country.
Oh, we went there. It was pretty cool. If I would have liked country, I think I would have loved it. Yeah. Because like every bar, there's just like guys on the guitar.
And then like a boot barn right next door to it.
Yeah. There's so many boot barns. How are they all in business?
So what kind of music are you into? What music are you into?
I really like all music, and I like some of the older country music, but the modern country is kind of blah. I mean, I like everything from Dvorak and Handel all the way up to Cypress Hill. I like it all.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
Yeah.
So I've seen a few videos on your channel are talking about like the plastics in food and like how you shouldn't eat plastics. So I'm always curious, these environmental toxins, there seems to be more and more of them that are bigger deals. Which ones do you think are like the big ones to be aware of? Because like when you start obsessing about everything, it gets a little just too much for people. So like maybe top few that we should be aware of.
Yeah, and I think for most people, the number one is the plastics. I think that's a huge endocrine or hormone disruptor for every human, especially for the little ones, for the toddlers and infants and children. It's a huge, huge deal. And so I'm actually doing a YouTube live with Dr. Anthony J later today at 5 p.m. Central on my YouTube channel about that. We're going to be talking about plastics in detail. But I think that's probably the number one toxin that people can actually do something about. Because I agree with you. If you worry about every single thing out there, you're not going to get anything productive done. And so I think that, and that's really what I try to hit on in all my videos, is the 80-20 principle. What should you focus on? Yeah, the 20% is also bad, but where is your effort and your attention span? Where is it going to be best spent? That's what I try to make videos about.
Yeah, and then a lot of people in chat are asking about this, and we made a video the other day. Basically, there's some diehard apple cider vinegar fans out there.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. Like, sometimes we make videos and things surprise me what people are really into, and apparently it's helping some people. So my whole thing was, I think apple cider vinegar, it's like mostly nonsense. Maybe it has a few applications that it's useful for. But when you look on YouTube and the internet as a whole, it's pretty much hailed as like a cure-all. So what's your take on apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, I think apple cider vinegar is fine. And I think that, I know back in the day when I was eating the standard American diet, and even when I was eating a paleo diet, I had severe daily heartburn, and apple cider vinegar definitely helped that. There's no doubt about it. But do I think that apple cider vinegar is in any way magical or necessary or optimizing of the human condition? No, I don't. But I think that it does serve a good purpose for a great many people. But I don't think there's anything magical about it. I think a lot of this maybe could be chalked up to the placebo effect. People have a strong belief, as you found out, about apple cider vinegar. And so I'll probably get some hate comments just for what I've just said, because I stepped off the reservation enough there to make somebody mad. But I don't think there's any magical things. I mean, I'm a proponent of apple cider vinegar. We actually use it in our Keto. We made a YouTube video about that. I think that's on Anishas' YouTube channel. But yeah, I think it's fine, but I don't think it's mandatory or magical at all.
So is it the vinegar aspect, or what is it specifically about the apple cider vinegar? I know it's like a fermented, it has some probiotics in it, but could you use any vinegar, or is it specifically apple cider?
I think that you should use only apple cider vinegar because it's magical.
Okay.
Yeah, could you imagine like taking a shot of white vinegar?
I could do balsamic vinegar, but that has like some sugar in it.
Yeah.
Balsamic vinegar is delicious. If you have it on like
it
some mozzarella and tomatoes and stuff.
Oh yeah, it is very tasty.
Yeah. So what's up with dietary antioxidants? I think when I was growing up, it was a big deal. It was a big selling point. Blueberries, loaded with antioxidants.
Grapes.
Now I hear more people saying, like, we don't really have proof that dietary antioxidants act as antioxidants.
Yeah, and I think that was a very faddish thing there for a while. It was very fashionable to talk about antioxidants and resveratrol and all these things, and a lot of YouTubers and kind of thought leaders about life extension, about human optimization, they were 100% on board with all the antioxidants. And I think that now we're looking back going, yeah, but the research really doesn't bear that out at all. And the same goes for all the magical phytonutrients that are in plant food. It sounds great, and it makes you feel happy and good in your heart and soul. But when you actually look at the research, it's quite disappointing that there's really much there at all about either one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we've been talking about recently and people asking is when they hit maintenance or they hit their goal weight, what is something they can do to like change it up, or should they add in more carbs? Like how should they go from their goal weight to just like maintaining weight? So if someone wants to play around with carbs, maybe add some, like even upwards of 100 grams, what would be the best sources if they really just want to do it?
Yeah, dark green, leafy veg, the alliums like onion and garlic. I wouldn't stray off into the grains at all. I wouldn't stray off into the sugar. I might eat some more berries, but I definitely wouldn't stray off into the fruit. And people are welcome to do anything they want to. And a lot of people think that keto is still like a hack. That's how they think of it. And so that makes that question make sense. Like, okay, I've achieved my goal weight. Now, what do I need to change? And what people need to understand is that when you're eating on the proper human diet spectrum, you don't change anything, because that's the proper human diet. You don't stop eating that, right? And it's like my alcoholic I was talking about earlier, my buddy living on the street. If I sent him to rehab and got him detoxed and dried out, after 6 months, if he came to me and said, okay, I'm dry now can I have a beer? Well, I mean, if you want to be living on the street again, I guess go have a beer. But otherwise, I would recommend ever drinking that slow poison again. And I think it's kind of the same way with unnecessary carbohydrates, and definitely with the inflammatory carbohydrates. That's not part of the proper human diet. It's just like if you fed your cat a jelly donut, if he got hungry enough, he would eat it. But that doesn't mean that it was good for your cat that you fed him a jelly donut.
Yeah.
So things like apples you would stay away from. So those have been found, thousands of years ago, but they're just bred differently. Is that the reason why you would stay away from it now?
Yeah. If you could find an heirloom apple that we used to have 5, 10, 15,000 years ago, it probably wouldn't be a big deal to eat that. Now, you probably wouldn't want to, because they're about this big around and they were green and they were sour. If you've ever taken a bite of a crab apple, that's how all the apples taste back then, before we bred and crossbred them into these big sacks of sugar that we have now. Same goes for grapes. In Tennessee, there's still the old country people call them possum grapes. They grow wild in the woods. They're about as big around as the tip of your pinky. And the reason they call them possum grapes is because the old possum is the only animal that'll eat them. They're so bitter and sour. But that used to be a standard grape. That's what grapes used to look like before we bred and crossbred them into things sweet enough to make wine and other things with. And so if you can find an ancestrally appropriate fruit, I think that's probably okay to eat. But that brings us back to our seasonality question. Mm-hmm. So yes, definitely humans used to eat seasonally, right? And so in the late summer and the fall, when the fruit got ripe, we ate as much of it as we could find. But I think that there was a protective mechanism. I think there was a reason we did that. First of all, it tasted good. It had sugar in it. But secondly, we didn't want to starve to death during the winter. And so if we could do like the black bear and the grizzly bear, and we could gain 5 or 10 pounds of fat by eating all that fructose and glucose right before the winter, then that would skyrocket our chances of not starving to death if it happened to be a very long or a very hard winter. And so when people talk about eating seasonally, I ask them, well, I mean, do you want to gain 5 to 10 pounds during the fall? And they're like, well, hell no. Then I wouldn't recommend eating seasonally and including a lot of fruit in your late summer and fall diet, because that's why all mammals eat the berries and the fruit, is to put on a layer of fat for the winter.
Mm-hmm. So are there other benefits to eating in season? Like things like if I'm eating more berries than in the winter, not like enough to gain a lot of weight and then just staying away in the summer?
Yeah, probably there's probably no benefit to that whatsoever. Other than
it might just be more nutritious.
Well, maybe, but I don't
like squash and stuff.
As opposed to getting them.
We've ever shown that. I don't know that we've ever shown that they have some nutrition that you can't get from eating nose to tail carnivore. But there might be. I'm still.
I mean, like the berries you're getting in like January at the grocery store, I would imagine the ones you're getting in the summertime a little more nutrient dense than the ones in the winter.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, if you're harvesting fruit off your own trees that you've let ripen to the peak of perfection, they're probably much more nutrient dense, and they're definitely sweeter. They have a higher sugar content. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they probably do have slightly or a lot more nutrition than the stuff that's picked green and shipped across the ocean, to ripen on your grocery store shelf. Yeah.
Yeah. So while we're talking about, I guess, the proper human diet, if we're thinking more ancestrally, so like now we have cows is the main source of, I guess cows and chickens, the main source of our protein, and they are higher fat, I think, now than we would have found in nature. So how do you kind of think about like the fat to protein ratio of a proper human diet? Because it seems like a keto diet is usually like 70 to 75% calories from fat. Is that what you would find in nature? I know in some places like the Inuit or whatever, they would eat like 80, 90%, but.
Yeah. And so that's a couple of good questions there. First, when we're comparing our modern cows, pigs, and chickens to animals in our modern wilderness, they are definitely much fattier meats. There's no doubt about that. But you have to realize the wild animals we have today are not the wild animals we had even 15, 20,000 years ago. We had, it was routine for humans to be able to kill and eat megafauna that dwarfed a city bus or a car. Like there were armadillos back then bigger than a Volkswagen Beetle. These things were huge fatty animals. There were elephants all over the world, even in the Americas. There were woolly mammoths everywhere. Before the catastrophe that seems to have happened somewhere around 10 to 15,000 years ago, this megafauna was everywhere, and they were very, very fatty. They were fattier than our modern cows, except maybe the Wagyu cow. But so the animals that we have in the wild currently are very, very lean. There's no doubt about that. But I think one of the reasons we bred our cattle and our pigs and chickens to be so fatty is mimicking the fat that we used to be able to find in the wild, because you can't find that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I did some reading, and like apparently you could just, like hunting back in the day, you could just like walk up to these animals. They were not really that scared of humans, and you could kill them.
Exactly, and basically I think we ran them to death. We would just start bugging them, 20 or 30 of us, and we didn't have to actually just attack the thing at full gallop. It didn't work like that. We would just run the thing, because most animals can't pant and gallop at the same time. Somehow they can't do that. And then when we were able to run upright and we were able to sweat, then we could just chase them all day long. And so we would run them until they were literally exhausted, and then they were an easy kill, even if they weighed, a ton or 2 tons or 3 tons.
Uh-huh.
So we keep talking about the proper human diet. We've never really addressed it, but aside of that, what about the thought of like eating like our ancestors, right? Isn't that a thing people say we should eat like our ancestors did?
You're talking
and that's like best for our body type.
Yeah, like I'm European, you're Indian, that type of
so
thing.
like my type of Indian though, we are vegetarians, heavy rice, heavy bread based. So is like that's what I would function best on? Well,
when we're talking about our ancestors, we really need to be sensitive of the timeline that we're talking about. So should you, Mega, eat like your ancestors for the last 200 years? No, I don't think you should eat like that at all. The ancestors I'm always talking about are your ancestors from at least 25,000 years ago and further back. Those are the ancestors you should eat like. Some of us, indeed, like me and Matt, we definitely have a lot of northern latitude DNA in us. I mean, you can look at us and tell that.
Yeah.
Our people didn't go anywhere near the equator for a long damn time, right? And so we ate lots of fatty meat. Also, I don't know if Matt's checked his 23andMe data, but I have more Neanderthal DNA than 97% of the population. And so again, they were almost they ate nothing but carnivore, and they even would eat carnivores. And so some people call them super carnivores. So they would actually kill the big cats and the bears and stuff and eat them. And we can tell all this from the paleoanthropological data. We can actually check stable carbon, nitrogen, and strontium isotopes in a bone, whether it's a year old or 100,000 years old. And we can tell, did this person eat grains? Which type of grain did they eat? Did they eat seafood? Did they eat red meat? We can tell all that stuff from the stable isotope analysis of their bones. And so I do believe that MAGA probably could eat a more leafy green, berry-filled ketogenic diet and probably do better than Matt. I think Matt should probably eat a more fatty meat, heavy, whether it's seafood or red meat. It may or may not matter. But he could probably, he would feel better if he just ate mainly fatty meat, whereas Maggie, you might feel better having quite a bit of greens and berries and stuff in your keto diet. And the proper human diet, as I currently define it, and obviously we're all rediscovering how human beings should eat. It's like we're all bumbling around in the dark trying to rediscover what we used to take for granted 100,000 years ago. But I think there's a spectrum from probably an ovo-lacto-pescatarian diet that's rich in fatty seafood, crustaceans, fish, mollusks. And that's one end of the spectrum. And then all the way to the other end would be somebody like Sean Baker or Paul Saladino, who just eats fatty red meat plus or minus the organs. And I think that full spectrum, and of course keto's in there, low carb could be in there, carnivore is obviously in there. But I think that is the spectrum of the proper human diet. But each person, because back again, we're kind of individual, I think then you can play around on that spectrum and find out, man, I feel best when I just eat mostly fatty meat, or I feel best when I eat lots of seafood and some green veg. That's where I feel my best. But I think that's the spectrum of what human beings should even experiment with. I don't think in any reality grains of any sort are good for human beings except as an alternative to starving to death. And I think that's why emperors and dictators, they feed their people grains and beans, because it's the cheapest diet you can feed a human being and them not starve to death very quickly.
So I'm sure people ask all the time, so no rice cereal for Beckett, I believe?
No. Beckett's 5 months old now, and we're doing this thing called baby-led weaning. You guys probably heard of that. And so when basically a baby lets you know when they're ready for more solid food, they'll start to grab things and put it in their mouth. And so when they've developed the finger touch sensation and the ability to pick something up reliably and then put it in their mouth, that's a good indicator. He also has his two little bottom teeth coming in. They're so cute and white. I just love it when he smiles. And then also he's watching us when we're sitting at the table. He's watching us do the hand to mouth thing, and you can tell he's much more interested in what we're doing now. And so the other night I took a couple of egg yolks and scrambled them up and put them on his little tray, and he would pick up a little piece and he would taste it and look around. And he didn't act like he hated it or loved it. He was kind of neutral about the egg yolk. Then we had some beef ribs, and after I'd cleaned the rib off pretty good, I just handed it to him. And he started chewing on the beef rib, just kind of the cartilage and what little bit of microscopic meat remained. And you should have seen his face. And he just lit up like, this is why you guys been doing this. This is good. And so he chewed on that rib bone for a good 10 minutes. Finally, Nisha had to take it away from him because there was literally a puddle of saliva on his tray. He was just drooling over this beef rib. And so probably the next thing he'll try will be some chicken liver or beef liver that's got a little salt on it. And so Beckett probably won't touch a grain or any kind of sugar like that until he sneaks some at a birthday party, and then he'll obviously pay the consequences for that because we all know what's going to happen, and then he'll learn from that experience. But his first foods, he will never have rice cereal. He will never ever have corn solids or soybean oil or canola oil. Those will never cross his lips, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as his mother's concerned, because we believe those things to be slow poisons for human beings. And infants and babies are also human beings. So
yeah.
So we got a few donations, and if you guys want to start asking questions, you can. We'll get to those soon here. Someone says, I lost 27 pounds following your keto plan. Thanks a lot. That's the Goo Goo Man.
Thank you.
And we got $5 from Cynthia. She says, 2 of my favorite keto resources, Casey and Dr. Berg, although I think she means Dr. Berry.
I'm the other Dr. B. I'm the other Dr. B, yeah.
Yeah. And then $5 from Lucy says, hope we get to see Theo and Beckett. I don't think you're going to get to, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly.
But you can see Theo in our vlogs and stuff. So last question I have, and then we'll get to some comments, is in this proper human diet, is there any sort of breakdown you look for of fatty acids, like dietary fatty acids? Like, what do you think about polyunsaturated fats? Is that something we need to emphasize to some degree, or just like accumulate them throughout the course of eating mostly carnivore diet? And what about like additional monounsaturated fats? A lot of people seem to think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So I don't think you need to supplement any fatty acids at all. I don't think you need to supplement any amino acids or collagens or proteins or branched chain amino acids. I think all of those supplements are a stupid waste of money. I hope you guys don't sell one. Sorry if you do. But I think if you're ovo-lacto pescatarian, it still needs to be heavy on the seafood and heavy on the eggs and heavy on the mollusks and crustaceans. You're going to get all of the mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids, plus all the saturated fatty acids that you need. You're going to get all that in that diet. And then if you're eating just a fatty red meat diet with some organs, again, you're going to get all that stuff you need. The human body is very capable of peeing or pooping out if you get too much magnesium or you get too much of this, that, or the other. That's why we excrete things, is things we don't need. So I really don't think it's something that people should focus a lot of time on or spend a lot of effort trying to calculate all that stuff. If you're eating an ovo-lacto-pescatarian diet that's rich in seafood, mollusks, shellfish, and crustaceans, or if you're eating a fatty red meat carnivore diet, you're going to get all the fatty acids and all the amino acids you need. It would be impossible for you not to get them all.
Okay, so some questions from the chat.
Someone kept asking, what are your thoughts on sweeteners and the Dorito effect?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit extract, I think they serve a valid purpose when somebody is first starting keto. Just like I think fat bombs and bulletproof coffees with a cup full of fat in the cup of coffee, those things serve useful purposes when somebody is trying to become fat adapted and kind of trying to remember what the proper human diet is. 2 years ago, Nisha and I, we had fat bombs in the fridge at all times. It was just mandatory. She wanted the savory ones and I wanted the sweet ones with chocolate. And that was our go-to, but we haven't had fat bombs in the fridge in over a year. We have no need of them anymore. So I think they're an excellent gateway, just like the bulletproof coffee is, just like the artificial sweeteners. And so on carnivore, I still drink coffee. That's why I don't say 100% carnivore, because obviously coffee doesn't come from an animal. But I never sweeten it anymore. And maybe the first cup of the morning, I might put a teaspoon of grass-fed butter. But through the rest of the day, I basically, now I drink coffee cola, which is half cold coffee, half Topo Chico, and then a good squirt of the electrolyte mineral drops over ice. And
that's what the kids are doing these days. They do the sparkling water with the coffee.
It's really delicious. I love that stuff. And so I might have a little fat in my coffee, the first coffee of the morning, but otherwise I don't do that anymore because I don't need to. When I do get hungry at 2, 3, or 4 p.m., I eat as much fatty meat as I can hold. And then I might eat a second meal or I might not, depending on, if I'm hungry and what else is going on with the family. But I think sweeteners serve a vital role to help people because they want to mimic their old diet. And I think for a while that's fine on keto, but then a lot of people find, because there's no doubt that all the sweeteners, whether it's stevia or whether it's brown sugar, they all raise your insulin, at least to some degree, because of something called the cephalic phase insulin response that happens in all mammals, not just human beings. And so and that's one of the 13 reasons why you might stall on keto. I've got a video on my YouTube channel called that. One of the reasons is the sweeteners. After a certain point, they may be raising your insulin level enough that it's stalling your fat burning. And so they may have to go at some point. And indeed, for me, I found that probably 2 years ago, I had lost weight and was doing great on keto, but I was stuck. I couldn't lose any more fat. And so in order to go to the next level, I had to cut back on the heavy cream in my coffee, and I had to get rid of all the sweeteners. That installed me, and then I started making great progress again.
Yeah, $20 donation from Bridgetta Johnson says you're amazing. She's probably talking about you.
No, I'm sure it's you guys.
An interesting take I hadn't heard before. I was listening to Dr. Ted Naiman. He says the real problem with the sweeteners is when you're using it to make calorie-dense foods more palatable. Yeah. And like if you're having non-caloric
diet
sodas and things like that with the sweeteners in it in isolation, like maybe away from a meal, that's not a big deal. And I think that's a cool way of looking at it. But yeah, when you're adding like stevia to already
a bulletproof coffee,
like stuff like that, it just makes the bolus of calories hyper palatable, which you don't really find that often in nature.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty cool perspective.
And then what about Nisha? Is she also carnivore with you?
Yeah, she went through a period of denial, and plus I'm sure she's like you are, Megan. She never wants to admit that I'm right. And so after I'd been carnivore for probably 8, 9, 10 months, I noticed that she would just eat meat with me, and she wasn't really making any of the vegetables and stuff like she used to do. And so I didn't say anything about it because I'm a smart husband. I'm not stupid. Right. But then eventually she said, well, I've got to tell you something. And I said, okay. Because, for those of you who don't know, Nisha has Hashimoto's as well. And so she's had a huge battle with that over the years. It got so much better with keto, but still gave her problems. She said, I've been eating carnivore for a couple of months now, and you're right. I feel amazing. I feel better than I've ever felt in my life. And a short while after that, we got her labs rechecked, and both of her antibody levels were as low as we had ever seen them with regards to her Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And so don't let anybody out there, a guru or an influencer, tell you that if you have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, that you've got to eat carbs or that you've got a carb cycle or carb up. First of all, there's no meaningful research that shows that at all. Secondly, my N=1 is in the house with our baby, and she's a carnivore now, despite having to admit that her husband was right about it.
Nice.
That's great, yeah.
And if you guys are totally new, he has a book that's available. It's called Lies My Doctor Told Me. And I think you made like a second edition. Is that true?
Yeah, the first one I self-published with Amazon and CreateSpace. And then Victory Bell Publishing, I guess they liked it and said, hey, let's redo this and actually make it a real book. And I said, hey, let's do that. So now it's got 2 or 3 extra chapters in it and lots of cool illustrations. And it's actually a real book now. And it's available wherever books are sold. And there's also a Kindle version and also an Audible version, which I did not read.
I was excited for a second.
Yeah. So we talked about this on our podcast pretty in depth.
Number 35.
Yeah, a big one I remember was sort of vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you thought the optimal range is like a little low, right? We want to be more on the higher end of that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the optimal range for a vitamin D level in the human body is 50 to 100. And make sure your doctor checks a vitamin D 25 level. That's the actual number you want to know. If your doctor checks a vitamin D 125, that's not going to give you the information that you need. We can actually go and we can check vitamin D levels on people who live more like we did in the past. And it's very common for their vitamin D levels to be somewhere between 70 and 120, which many doctors in the United States would immediately freak out and say you're vitamin D toxic if your vitamin D level was that high. But that's normal for human beings to have a vitamin D level well above 50, and probably 100 is just an arbitrary cutoff. But anything above 100, and the average U.S. doctor is going to crap their pants and send you to the emergency room, even though it's based on no research whatsoever. But we played out in the sun much more back in the day. Yeah. And if we lived at the northern latitudes, like my ancestors and Matt's ancestors, then we ate lots of vitamin D rich seafood and fats. And so we were getting tons of vitamin D. And there's just not a lot of vitamin D in the modern diet. Even on the average keto diet or carnivore diet, there's still not enough vitamin D. And I still take 5,000 units of vitamin D3 every day, except in the summer, at which point I'm outside a lot and usually shirtless, trying to get as much vitamin D from the sun as I can.
Okay, because usually most doctors will consider 5,000 like if you have a deficiency, like to recover from that, and then 1,000 more of like a maintenance dose. So you're thinking 5,000 is more of a maintenance dose. And I actually,
before the clinic fire, I had thousands of patients, and I checked hundreds and hundreds of vitamin D levels, and most of my patients were taking 5,000 units every day because that's what I told them to take. And maybe one person out of 250 of the ones I tested would have a vitamin D level above 100 by taking 5,000 units a day. The vast majority taking 5,000 units a day would get their vitamin D level somewhere between 40 and 70. That's where it would get them, which is much better than the average person in the United States whose vitamin D level is probably 20.
Okay. We got a question from Celine. She says, should we be concerned about omega-6s in farm-raised salmon, pork, and chicken?
Yeah, it's a good question. So definitely the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is different in farm-raised versus ancestrally raised animals. There's no doubt about that. The average American eats an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of about 20 to 1. Or 25 to 1, which is very inflammatory and very unhealthy. Probably an optimal ratio is somewhere between 6 to 1 down to 2 to 1, omega-6 to omega-3. So omega-6 are not bad, but eating too many omega-6 fatty acids is probably inflammatory, especially if you're getting them from industrial vegetable seed oils. That's definitely the worst place to be getting them. But I think that even the worst, cheapest farm-raised animals are still going to have a tolerable omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Mm-hmm. And then a big topic lately seems to be immune system, obviously, with this thing we got going on here. So
Yep.
my understanding is like immune system is sort of a long-term project. It's not like you can do these things to boost your immune system in like the next couple of weeks. Is that true? And then how does vitamin C, that's a big one that sort of like plays in. People think vitamin C fights off a lot of stuff. What do we do?
Yeah. So first of all, the first part, that's not true at all. Now, some minor components of your immune system, it might take you a few weeks or a few months to get them back to normal. But the bulk of your immune system can start to optimize within minutes of you changing your diet. So if there's somebody new out there and you're eating pretty much whatever, you're like everybody else who's self-isolating, you bought all the chips and cookies and you're sitting around eating that. Or if you're eating pseudo-healthy and you got the Quest bars and the protein bars, which are really carbohydrate bars, then you're mucking up your immune system. And I actually have a YouTube video about this called Which Diet Optimizes Your Immune System? And there's tons of research. This is really not up for debate. There's both observational research, but there's also controlled research about this. When you eat any food that spikes your blood sugar, it immediately weakens your immune system. And this has been measured and recorded in the show notes of that video. I list the research, and I'm talking about even transient, short-term elevations in blood sugar muck up your immune system. And so basically the innate immune system is the part of your immune system that you use to fight a virus that your body's never seen before. This is not like, I've had mumps and therefore I can't get them again. That's a different part of your immune system. But the innate part is basically ruled by neutrophils. And so for a neutrophil to fight infection, it's first of all got to detect, there's an infection. That process is mucked up by eating too many carbohydrates and raising your blood sugar. Then it's got to attach to the little cells in a blood vessel. And that's mucked up by eating too many carbohydrates and raising your blood sugar. Then it's got to squeeze between two of the endothelial cells to get down into the infected tissue. That process is mucked up by eating too many carbohydrates and raising your blood sugar. Then it does a process called phagocytosis, where it actually engulfs or eats the cell, your cell that's infected with virus, right? That part is also mucked up if you've eaten carbs and raised your blood sugar. And so eating too many carbohydrates for you personally, whatever that tolerance level is. And so if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor or you check your blood sugar and your fasting blood sugar is above 100 or 105, unless you're already a carnivore, because that's a different thing. But if you're eating the standard American or paleo or vegetarian and your fasting blood sugar is above 100, your immune system's compromised by that. If you check your blood sugar an hour after you eat a meal and your blood sugar is above 140, your immune system is devastated by that, immediately devastated, not long-term devastated. And so for somebody today, if they're like, I don't want to catch any viruses, then they need to lower their carbohydrate intake. And the research that I'm talking about is in the show notes of my YouTube video.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then Donut, would you say Donut, asked, can there be a problem with eating too much protein on a carnivore diet?
Yeah, no. One of the very first medical myths that I started seeing in my clinic, because I'd have people come back from the nephrologist and they'd say, yeah, they told me they're diabetic, right? But the kidney specialist would tell them to avoid eating too much protein. And I kept thinking back to my physiology classes in my biochemistry and my cell and molecular biology. And I was like, I can't remember the mechanism, how protein would be bad for the kidney. And so I did a Google search, protein bad for kidney myth. And immediately hundreds of articles written by doctors and kidney specialists and PhD level researchers. They're like, why will this myth not die? Why does every doctor still think protein is bad for kidneys? And so the truth of the matter is, when you look at the research, there's never been a single study that shows that eating either moderate, high, or even ultra high levels of protein are bad for your kidneys. Now, if you're using a protein supplement powder or a collagen powder, branched chain amino acid powder, first of all, we don't know where that protein came from. Secondly, you may be able to overload your system with that. But if you're getting your protein from meat, right, there's zero evidence that you're ever going to do anything except help your kidneys by eating that diet. And so I think I agree with Ted Naiman. I think a high protein, moderate fat ketogenic diet is great. I also agree with Dr. Eric Westman that a high fat, moderate protein keto diet is great. Whichever one works best for you, but protein is not bad for your kidneys. Protein is good for your kidneys. Your kidneys are made out of protein. That's what they are. The reason that we have a dialysis clinic on every corner in every small town in the country is because of eating too many carbohydrates, not from eating too much protein.
Yeah, isn't there evidence that a high protein could be bad if you have pre-existing kidney issues? Is that, and then they like extrapolated from that, and I think that's where the myth comes from?
No.
Okay.
But you're right, yes, but no. And so the research that the people talk about, when you actually look at it, they're looking for markers. They're not looking for actual kidney damage. Even those studies don't show actual
That's what they do
kidney
these days. I've noticed this. They do it with cholesterol too, and then they say risk factor for heart disease.
Exactly right. And so, but when you say, I want to find a study where there's an example of somebody who had pre-existing kidney disease and they ate so much meat, they caused more kidney damage, you'll never find that. It doesn't exist. And either an in vivo study or in vitro, even in animals, you can't really show that. Protein is not bad for kidneys. Now, and I think the reason that myth started is because when you do have protein or kidney damage caused by eating too many carbohydrates, one of the symptoms or signs we notice of that is that you spill protein into your urine. And so I think a lot of doctors who are doing that half-assed thinking that many doctors are capable of, they associate, well, since you're spilling protein in your urine, then maybe you're putting in too much protein in your mouth. Maybe that's what's going on here. But that's idiotic kindergarten thinking for a doctor to be doing. That's not how it works at all. The carbs damaged your kidneys, or the toxic substance, whatever that damaged your kidneys, that's what did the damage. The sign that you have kidney damage is that you're spilling protein in your urine. That does not mean protein caused the damage.
Okay. So when you're looking at like a high elevated creatinine level, like 1.7, 2, and then the GFR is lower, what does that indicate? Are those the numbers to be looking at?
Well, the GFR is the kind of the gold standard. Many people who are carnivore will have a higher creatinine level. Just like many people who are 100% carnivore, they'll have a fasting blood sugar of 95 or 100 or even 105. That's completely normal for them because during the night while they were fasting, their red blood cells needed some glucose, so their liver was happy to oblige through gluconeogenesis to make some glucose for their red blood cells. But if you check a hemoglobin A1C on these people, their A1C is 5.1 or 4.8. I mean, they're nowhere near being a diabetic, even though their morning blood sugar is higher. These people might have, if they're eating lots of fatty meat, they might have a slightly elevated creatinine level. And in somebody eating a standard American diet, that is absolutely a marker that there might be kidney damage. And then the next thing a doctor would look at is the estimated glomerular filtration rate, which is a calculated number. And then we would say, does this person have kidney damage or not? But that doesn't mean there's kidney damage. It just means you need a good doctor would look deeper into that individual case.
Okay, and Donut is really coming with the questions today.
Right.
This is a common one I think a lot of people have when they hear about the carnivore diet is this idea, fiber. A lot of people say it helps the gut microbiome, and Donut is also saying and it helps flush out toxins. And I know there is a lot of evidence, like in the context of a standard American diet, fiber seems to be good.
Yep.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, so two phytonutrients that if you're eating a standard American diet or even maybe a high carb paleo diet, you need some fiber in your diet, and you probably need some to supplement with some vitamin C because you are eating a lot of toxins. You're eating a lot of stuff that's completely unusable by the human digestive system. And so you're going to make a lot of poop. And the average person eating the standard American diet will poop 2 or 3 huge stinky poops every day. But the more fatty meat you eat, the more you're basically eating 100% human nutrition. And if you get on the carnivore Facebook groups or the chat rooms, carnivores don't poop like that. The average carnivore has one very small poop a day, and some have a poop every other day. They just don't poop 2 or 3 times a day like people do when you're feeding them a slow poison, high carbohydrate diet, because everything you eat on a carnivore diet is the ultimate in nutrient density. There are no toxins. The toxins are in the plant food. So if you're eating a standard American diet, you definitely don't want those toxins sitting in your colon for a long time. You want to use some fiber to move that through. But as you transition to a fatty meat heavy keto diet, whether it's ovo-lacto-pescatarian or red meat, or you move all the way to a carnivore diet, you're not eating nearly as many toxins. You're eating as nutrient dense a diet as you can eat, and therefore you don't have a lot of waste to poop out.
So this may be a simple question. I feel like a lot of people get confused with the change in poop when they go keto and then carnivore. Yep. Could you tell us just a quick difference between actually being constipated versus just, hey, my new norm is pooping once a day, smaller?
Yep. That's a huge question. And a lot of people, they think that if I haven't pooped, I'm constipated. There's actually a medical definition of constipation, and that ain't it. Okay. Constipation is when you're having bowel pain. Constipation is when you haven't pooped in a way longer time than you normally poop. But then also you have to have pain. You have to have straining. You have to have cramps. You have to have bleeding. That's what constipation is. And so the average person, when they go from eating a slow poison, heavy standard American diet to eating a much more nutrient rich ketogenic diet, even if that's still very veg heavy, they're not eating nearly the amount of undigestible slow poisons. And so they're not going to poop as much. And you hear this, oh, I'm constipated. And then every single time, guys, when I say, what are your symptoms? They're like, well, I haven't pooped today. And I'm like, yeah, but what are your symptoms? They're like, what do you mean? I don't have any symptoms. That's not constipation. They just haven't accumulated enough waste in their colon to have the urge to poop. Also, the standard American diet is very inflammatory in nature. It inflames the inside and irritates the inside of your colon. Therefore, the cramps and the urge, and we've all been there when we were eating that crap. We'd be like, ooh, I gotta go. I'll be right back. Right? We've all had that. Yeah. But you don't have that when you're eating a fatty meat heavy keto diet. Pooping is something that's much more physiologically and ancestrally appropriate. Imagine 100,000 years ago if we had to go 3 or 4 times a day and take this ginormous stinky poop. That wouldn't work well, right? I mean, we would be extinct if we did that.
All your hunting buddies would be making fun of you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you'd be kicked out of the tribe because that was not normal back then. Back then, we'd be very small, very discreet poops, often with very little odor. And people who've never tried the carnivore diet will just laugh at this, like, what in the world? But I'm telling you, as a carnivore, there is very little evidence that you have pooped after you poop. There is carnivores just don't have gas. It just doesn't happen. They very often have ghost poops. And if you don't know what that is, you can Google that later. But it's because everything we eat, we absorb and use as nutrition, because that is the proper human diet. And so that's not constipation. There are many carnivores that only poop once every 3rd day. They're not constipated. Everything they eat is 100% nutrition. There is no waste that the body has to get rid of as much as when you're eating the slow poison standard American diet.
Do you think it might be best to transition the fiber down slowly when you're starting a carnivore or a keto diet then, or do you think doing it just all at once is fine?
With regards to symptoms and your comfort level, it's probably best to wean it down over a month or 2. You're not, because it's just like if you go from straight SAD diet to hardcore keto, you're going to have some carbohydrate withdrawal syndrome, which some people call keto flu. And if you transition straight to carnivore, you're going to have some hardcore carbohydrate withdrawals. And that could also include some diarrhea or constipation even, as a reaction to you withdrawing the carbohydrates too quickly. Just like if I took our alcoholic buddy on the streets of Nashville and I dried him out too quickly, he could even have seizures. Does that mean he should go back to drinking the vodka? Nope, it doesn't mean that. It just means I should have weaned him down slower. I did it too quickly. And I think people who are eating a terribly unhealthy diet, maybe even a diet recommended by the American Heart Association or the American Diabetes Association, they shouldn't come off that addictive slow poison diet too quickly, or they might have carbohydrate withdrawals. And I think it's fine to do that slowly over a 1 or 2 month period.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then winding down here, last question. I know you are of the opinion that dairy is not really for humans, and
Yep.
I want to love it. Like, I love dairy. I try to eat it. I've done this experiment probably like 3 different times. I get this raw milk from the local farm, and it's like really easy to get.
Yep.
Sounds cool, like raw milk and all this. But then I drink it and I get like dandruff and like my eyebrows. I get like little
100%.
dry skin,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it happens every single time.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, maybe I just give up. Is it just the lactose? Like, can I still do kefir and cheese, or like, what's your whole take?
For some people, it is the lactose. But you've got to remember that there are proteins in bovine milk that are foreign proteins that present foreign antigens to the human body. There is no other mammal on the planet that drinks the milk of another species. Either as a, I mean, they might, there might be a mammal that slips their baby into another.
I saw, though, recently on Reddit, there was a kitten that was feeding puppies because she lost
definitely.
a cat.
Yeah, but
it was really cute.
But you will not find an example of
In
a
the wild.
grown-up adult canine nursing from a cat. You'll never find that. First of all, the cat wouldn't allow it. Secondly, the dog knows better. But yeah, a puppy's still a puppy. They need milk, just like for the first 2 to 5 years of an adult, or for a human, we need milk, and we're built to digest milk. After that, we lose not only the ability to break down the lactose, but we also become much more sensitive to the proteins in milk as well. And I hear the people talking about raw milk, and I think it's perfectly safe and should be completely legal. But I think there's a subset of people, and I'm one of those people too, Matt. Back when I drank dairy all the time, I had chronic allergic rhinitis and chronic dandruff, and then even in my eyebrows, I would get scaly if I drank too much milk. And so, no adult human should really eat any dairy at all. But full disclosure, I freaking love dairy, no doubt about it. I love it. I love cheese. I love heavy cream. I love butter and ghee. But really, the only 2 dairy products that are low protein and low carbohydrate enough, they're basically pure dairy fat, is butter and ghee. And I can still use those. And even at this point, if I use too much heavy cream, I can immediately start to feel the inflammation in my joints and the bloating in my gut. And so if people love dairy and they're willing to ignore the symptoms, then, whatever, just like the alcoholic, if he ignores the vodka symptoms, I guess he can drink it. But it's just not ancestrally appropriate. There's copious amounts of research that shows that the majority of humans on this planet, and if you live in the United States, this is not immediately apparent, but the majority of all humans on this planet, over 60%, cannot drink milk without immediate symptoms. And so if the majority of humans can't eat or drink something without having immediate negative symptoms, that's probably a sign that even though the few of us who can seemingly drink it and not have symptoms, we should probably leave that alone as well.
Okay.
Has he sold you?
No, I've sold myself. Just like I've done it so many times. I'm like, this time's going to be different. But I always get the
2 gallons
eyebrows.
of milk in the fridge,
Yeah.
so
I know.
we can't waste that.
But I get the whole argument that raw milk, if you get it from an A2 cow or a goat or a sheep, but it's still not ancestrally appropriate. Never in our existence on this planet for 250,000 years did an adult human ever drink milk from a mammal. We didn't do that as adults. It just never happened. The opportunity, we might have done it if we were starving, but it was not something that we did on a regular enough basis. And there's no example of a mammal sneaking into the barn and sucking, the cow's teeth. If that were truly a smart survival skill, there would be a weasel or there would be some kind of skunk or varmint that would have learned that skill. But all wild animals know better than that. They just know that's not a good survival technique.
That would be a cool animal. What?
Yeah, so
Right.
quick question then. What is your take on the Weston A. Price diet regarding pregnant women? I feel like Nisha followed that? Maybe I'm mistaken, but it calls for whole milk. I know I kind of followed the guidelines. I didn't consume the whole milk. That's just something I didn't do, but most of it I did. So yeah, what are your thoughts there?
It also recommends some grains, I think.
Like sourdough. Sorry.
I agree with a great many things that Weston Price said and wrote. I've got a copy of his book. I think he was one of the giants upon whose shoulders we all stand. But I don't agree with everything that he said. And I don't agree with everything that the foundation says. I'm a member of Weston A. Price, but I don't agree with their stance on whole milk. Now, I do think that raw whole milk is less bad than supermarket skim milk, 100%. I think it's less bad. I think if you can get milk from an A2 cow or a goat or a sheep, I think that's less bad. But being less bad doesn't make it actually good or optimal.
Yeah, so I got the diet on screen right now. Yeah, we followed most of this. We didn't do the soaked whole grains.
Nor did we.
Yeah, I didn't do fruits. I didn't do.
We did some fruits though, like light amount of fruits.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, we followed it for the most part. I think the main thing is, I don't know, maybe you have an opinion, but it seems like a big thing to stress when pregnant is vitamin A and omega-3s. Are those like, I guess folate as well?
Yep. And iodine and vitamin D, all those things are huge. And let me say this, because there's so many doctors giving terrible advice about this particular subject. There is not a single case report ever of a human female becoming vitamin A toxic from eating liver. There has never been a single case of that in recorded medical history. So if your obstetrician tells you now don't eat liver as a pregnant woman, that's ignorant advice. You need to be eating liver as a pregnant woman 2 or 3 times a week. That's a very ancestral food that every primitive culture goes out of their way to make sure pregnant women eat, because it's full of vitamin A, it's full of vitamin D, vitamin E, and even K2. All the DHA, EPA, it's literally a superfood multivitamin for pregnant women. It also has folate. But there's not been a recorded example. It's just a theoretical concern that you might get too much vitamin A, get vitamin A toxicity from eating liver. It's ignorant. There's no research that shows that to be true. And then also there's no ancestral example of pregnant women avoiding liver or sea fish or mollusks. There's never been a study that showed that. I mean, eating a salad is more dangerous for the average pregnant woman than eating raw oysters or eating liver.
Yeah, that's where most of these like foodborne illnesses come from, the salads.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they come from animal feces usually, but it's like transmitted through the salad.
Easily, yeah.
Right.
Last question. Let's make this the last one. From Cynthia, $5 donation. Did you address hot flashes and keto or natural help? And a lot of people ask about like menopause and keto. Any tips on that?
Yeah, pregnant women absolutely can and should eat a very, very low carbohydrate diet, whether you want to call that low carb or keto or carnivore. I don't really care what you call it, but you need to really cut down on the carbohydrates, because then you're going to be eating a proper human diet. But Nisha and I have had hundreds and hundreds of women, both in the practice in Camden, but then also online, say, when I'm eating keto, my hot flashes and night sweats and my irritability and my mental fogginess are much, much better. Does that make sense? And the first time or two I heard that, back when I thought keto was just a temporary hack, because that's what I originally believed, I was like, nah, that's probably coincidence. But Matt, after I hear something from women hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of times, it's hard to call that a coincidence. And so it makes sense when you remove all of the unnecessary carbohydrates and all the inflammatory things, because the fat loss of keto is a hormonal process, right? You're actually hacking your hormones and putting them back where they should be for optimal fat burning. That's how keto works. It also makes sense. It's going to, when you get your insulin level back to normal, insulin, it's one of its main jobs is to store fat and to get blood sugar out of your bloodstream. That's true. It has hundreds of other functions. It's intimately related with all of your other hormones, including estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And so when you get your chronic hyperinsulinemia back to low normal levels, it makes perfect physiological sense that all of your hormones are going to move in the right direction. And indeed, I've had many women in the practice who were perimenopausal. Their periods were starting to get very irregular and unpredictable, go right back to having normal monthly periods. Some of those women were not happy about that. I had 2 women at the Berry Clinic when they started keto, they thought they were perimenopausal and they couldn't get pregnant. They came to my office very upset with me because they were both knocked up because the ketogenic diet had basically given them the hormone profile of a younger woman. I understand they individually should be upset with me about that and so from that day forward, I started telling women, are you on birth control? Do you want to get pregnant? Because if you eat keto, you might get knocked up. I had to start telling women that because I didn't realize that was going to happen in the early days of recommending keto. But the reason that happens is because you're moving their entire global hormone profile to a younger person's profile, and that's going to make the hot flashes and night sweats better. It makes perfect sense now.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We kept you a little longer than usual.
No worries.
What are you working on? Where can everyone find you?
Well, I've got a little YouTube channel. If you search Dr. Berry on YouTube, you should find that.
Very little, guys.
I've got a little Facebook page. Just search Dr. Berry on Facebook. I've got the book out there, Lies My Doctor Told Me, and I'm working on a couple of more books right now. One's about lab work and lab values, what you should ask your doctor for lab work wise, and what the results mean. That's going to be a smaller book. And then I'm working on a bigger book that's tentatively titled The Proper Human Diet. And it's basically going into painful detail about the spectrum of the proper human diet, and not just diet, but also lifestyle, mineral, sleep, activity, hygiene, eating and not eating. Fasting is a big part of that. And so that's going to be a while coming. The lab book will probably be out next. And then I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, Vero, TikTok. I'm on TikTok trying to
What's Vero?
The teenagers to eat keto. Vero is kind of a wannabe Instagram type thing. It's not a big deal right now, but if Instagram ever screws the pooch, Vero will probably take its place.
Nice. Awesome. Well, this has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Berry.
It's always a pleasure talking to you guys.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. See you next time.
Bye. All right, guys. That's pretty much going to do it for today.
Yeah, that was fun. That was great.
Yeah, it was a good one. As always, comment and DM us on Instagram and stuff if you have recommendations for who else we can have on.
Yeah. And if you have questions and you join us, then we definitely try and hit those at the end.
Yeah, thanks so much, though. It was fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of viewers. We really appreciate it.
Hopefully we'll get one more in this week.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow or Friday. But definitely we'll get some in next week and even a cook-along next week. So we got some fun things planned for you.
All right, see you guys.